Hi, everybody. My name is Priya Sachdev. Excited to join you today. I am the Director of Global Sales Enablement at Global Step. Look forward to the next couple of minutes of sharing some experiences and best practices on sales enablement with you. Just to give you a quick background, I have been in sales for 108 quarters, been with multiple organizations over my career span, specifically focusing on B2B sales and channel sales. The last organization that I worked with was Milliheim Group, where I also had the opportunity to be a sales consultant and work on sales performance management projects with various organizations globally, from small, medium to large, from direct sales to channel sales, from B2B to B2C. And I do hope that today in my conversation, I'm able to bring some of those experiences on the table as well. Being with Global Step for the past 6 months, focusing specifically on the sales enablement charter here and working with the organization to set up a sales and marketing ecosystem which enables us to get the revenue growth that we are chasing for ourselves. So that's just a bit about me. Let's talk a little more about the nuts and bolts of sales enablement, specifically in these times of the pandemic. It wouldn't be fair if I did not talk about the pandemic in the times of pandemic, even though I think it is something that's been like spoken more than it is required to be spoken of now. So I'm going to request you to hit the pause button here with me, just for the next 15 odd minutes. Just pause everything else that's happening around you. And the reason I say that is I know we are in a virtual environment and there are just so many things happening around us. Let's just take this opportunity to focus on the task at hand, which is to talk about sales enablement and kind of focus our energies on thinking about what could you do differently, or what were some of the practices you could take from here that would apply in your world as well. And that's why I'm also kind of putting this out there. And the other thing that I've realized is we are not pausing enough nowadays. So it's just a good reminder for ourselves to do that as well. Um, very often when we've spoken about sales, we've said sales is an art, or we've debated that sales is a science and is becoming more a science. Today, with all the technology tools and the big data available to us, sales is more and more really becoming analytics as well. And as we talk about sales enablement, I am going to talk a bit more about this. But before I go forward, we've all been through this in these pandemic times, right? When this happened to us sometime in February, March, we were all in that stage of denial and like, can't happen to us. It's going to be gone in a week or two. I will be back to my nice travel schedules again. But then we moved to that next stage of confusion where we were literally peeping from between our fingers and saying, okay, is it gone yet? What lockdown? What are we supposed to do? And I'm not sure about you, but I can tell you at least I'm there and I see a lot of people around me there where we've now got into a new rhythm. I don't know, it's work from home or home at work, but the families got the rhythm. The support systems around us have taken on this rhythm. And there's a rhythm and a cadence around what we are doing in what we call the new norm. Now, if we were to take the same thing to businesses, however, we see the businesses seem to be struggling a little more than what we've personally struggled with. And I think the reason why I like wanted to call this out before we go any further is I work with a lot of startups as a mentor as well, and I've realized that a lot of businesses are still playing the game by the old rules. And I am an Indian, and being an Indian, if I don't bring in a cricket metaphor, it wouldn't be fair. So here it is, right in front of my presentation. So if we were to use cricket as a metaphor, what we were playing as a game earlier was like batting on this pitch, right? It's all clean, clear. The weather is beautiful. We've got the rules defined, and it was just playing by those rules. However, what this pandemic has done, with everything that it's created and thrown us out of absolute, disruption, is the new game. And really, this is a game. I know a lot of people in our country would have experienced this. It's a form of soccer played while it's raining. I don't know if any of you've experienced it, but it's a really fun game. And the point I want to make here is you can't apply the rules of that smooth pitch here, right? Because it's not just the rules have changed, the game's changed. And I think the businesses who figured this out are doing well, and they are on whatever curve you would call it, the hockey stick or the W or the J, but that's happening to them. But the ones who are still living with what we call the legacy bias are struggling with it. So I think the first thing I want to call out today is for all of us to understand and appreciate that the business game that we were playing earlier to the game that we are going to play now is different. It's time to think like a startup again. It's time for you to go back and question everything you're doing, your resources, your processes, your people, and look at how do you want to play this game? Because this is a new game. And I think that's the important thing there. Um, Also, the other big thing that's created a disruption is everything's gone digital, right? And some of our businesses were easy to take to the digital platform, some were not as easy as the others. And as businesses, what we have learned to do or should learn to do is to create this seamless integration between digital, analog, and digital. And you're in B2C or B2B, this is the reality of our life. Right? Today, as I talk through some of the points, I am going to talk through broadly two key areas. One is how do we measure success? And this is where I am talking about the nuts and bolts. And the second piece then I will touch upon is how do you build you and scale your enabling teams, right? So let's kind of dive right into it and look a little more in detail on the sales enablement pieces. So the first thing, what is sales enablement? And I'm sure there are multiple definitions there on Google. But just out of my experience, I do want to say it is not training. A lot of people tell me, oh, sales enablement means sales training. No, it's not training, right? Sales enablement is also not marketing. It's not just building assets and giving it to salespeople to sell or creating an outreach plan, which is really what a small piece of what marketing does, but that's not sales enablement. Sales enablement is also not selling. So you are not actually delivering that final execution of the task, right? But what is sales enablement? It's not a definition that I picked from anywhere, but just few words that I put together myself, part of the experience. I think sales enablement is aligning your sales objectives to the business strategy and then having the ability to translate them into activities and tasks that need to be managed by the customer interface resources. And this is not just about sales, but these could be other customer interface roles as well, right? And how are you going to enable that is by providing tools, assets, and behaviors for successful sales. In my mind, that is what sales enablement is. Um, if we were to kind of get specific within that sales enablement thing, the first thing that kind of stands out to me is the power of focus. Every business today needs to do that readjustment. You have to look at your focus and ensure that you have that laser sharp focus because, as they say, right, you cannot be everything to everyone in any relationship. So, be it true in customer interfacing as well. But you can be something great for someone, and you need to identify that someone and then go after it with complete passion. So, using NUTS as an acronym here, but let's look at what are a few things we need to be doing in sales enablement. The first thing is be nimble in segmentation. And this is the best time to fail fast if you have to fail, right? Everybody's going to blame the pandemic and not blame you. So, good chance to do it. But ensure you bring in that laser sharp focus in segmentation. Also, the other thing that is important is segment between rabbits, deers, and elephants. And guys, I'm an animal lover, and I'm just using this metaphor because it's easier to explain using this. But I do not want you to go hunting. But imagine yourself, if you were to do rabbit hunting, is very different than deer hunting and is very different than elephant hunting. And the difference is in hunting because the difference is in the way the animal behaves. Now, that's true in our customer scenarios as well. So, it is important when we are doing our segmentation, we are also looking at these elements there, right? And that's kind of the segue into the next point. Understand your customer persona. Understand how do they make the buyer decision. The rabbit is going to make the buyer decision differently than the deer versus the elephant. Also, how do they take the decision? Are they going to do that individually, or will there be multiple people getting involved for that decision to be made? Tailor the outcomes. Talk to them in their language, right? It's buyers don't buy products or services, they buy what the product and service can do for them. So it's important for us to be able to tailor the outcome to each individual buyer and talk to them about that. And that's also kind of the final point there. Be succinct in your value proposition. Speak to the customer in their language. Value is not what you think you would give in terms of value, but value is what is perceived by the customer. And keep that in mind as you're going through that structure, right? And now, while we're talking about this, what is sales enablement really doing is providing the matrix and the tools for these nuts to be clearly articulated, measured, and managed, leveraging the technology tools, be it the CRM or marketing automation or whatever else you're using in terms of Salesforce automation, right? Let's look at the bolts then, right? And as we go through these points, remember, there is a process about who we are going after, but then there is also how are we going to do it. So the bolts are kind of focusing more on the how. And that's where I think the important thing first is to balance the tedium and the ingenuity in sales. CSO Insights, in their report of 2018, did a study on the time and motion of salespeople. And there was data which stood out, which said salespeople spend only 36% of their time in sales activities, which means 64% of their time is going into non sales activities. Now, the important role of sales enablement then is to look at how are you going to balance the tedium and the ingenuity in both those elements to make the 36% most effective and to ensure that you reduce the 64% by taking away the tedium onto technology and giving back more time on this side of sales activities, right? The next point is around optimized resources. Cost of sales, still not measured in our balance sheets as a specific call out, but is an important cost that we are incurring. And I don't know about you, but at least the organizations where I'm having conversations, a lot of them think their cost of sales has gone up. And this is impacted by the utilization of resources. So the important thing then is that how do we build alignment for best utilization of resources, which is to look at how do you prioritize, how do you build scorecards, how do you have qualification criteria before you start putting money behind those deals, right? Um, the L there is leveraging data and analytics. If you were to go and ask the customer what's that most important thing for them today, they would say, understand me before you come to me. Means even our platforms like our Amazons and Netflix can do that just by understanding your buying pattern, your viewing pattern, and looking at the data and analytics there. It is sad that our sellers are still not leveraging this data as much. So it is important that in sales we start leveraging this data. And I think to leverage it, we need to have that right layer of analytics on the data so that it can give us intelligence on our customers as we start to reach out to them. The next one there is time management. I don't ever agree with this term of time management, but I'm still using it because I can't find a better one. And the reason for not agreeing to that is that you can't manage a resource that's a fixed resource. Time is a fixed resource. Everybody, each one of us has 24 hours in a day, right? Then it becomes critical, how do we manage ourselves within those hours? And that's also kind of leading back to saying, how, what are the activities that you're focusing on? How do you identify your must win accounts, your priorities, your big rocks? And then ensure that you first focus on those and then let everything else fill up your time. The S is a systematic approach. I can't stress on this enough, even though this is kind of the last point on this slide. If you have 100 sellers and each one of them has their own sales styles, which they are going to use in customer engagement, there is going to be a churn, right? So important thing is to have a systematic approach. Design a consistent and uniform process of customer engagement that works for you. So we often say what gets measured gets done. I also believe what follows a process gets results. So, what is sales enablement doing here is really providing performance and behavior matrix for you to ensure that all these nuts and bolts are in play, right? And so, those are some of the best practices I would like to put forth. This is stuff that I'm working on in my role in sales enablement at Global Step as well. And it's an easy to use acronym for you to take away from our session today. The second piece I want to touch upon very quickly is around building sales enablement. So, if sales is a team sport, then sales enablement is like the league of that team sport, right? What it needs to ensure is that there is alignment across all functions to support the customer interfacing roles to win sales, which then means that sales enablement is not a function. It is not just something that one person in the organization or five people in the organization can do. Sales enablement is a KPI. It should be owned by all the functional leaders, be it HR, supply chain, client services. Everybody owns this KPI. Because enablement, I think, follows this 70-20-10 that we often talk about in terms of learning, right? Only 10% of the learning happens as formal learning. 20% of our learning happens what we call as social learning, right? You learn from your networks, your coaches, your mentors, and 70% of that learning happens through experiences. So enablement and sales enablement also follows this 70-20-10, which means the leaders and the managers are really the torch bearers of sales enablement. So if we are talking about how do you build a sales enablement team, it is really to look at how do you ensure each leader and manager in the organization has this KPI of sales enablement and is doing their bit to create that sales and marketing ecosystem for us to win. Also, sales and marketing alignment is absolutely essential for effective sales enablement. It has to be what is today called smarketing, right? It's sales and marketing coming together. There cannot be two separate functions, and sales enablement sitting as the third one. Recipe for disaster, as per me. Operations and service obviously play a critical role in repeat sales. So sales enablement KPI sits there as well. So if we are talking about sales enablement in terms of how do you build that in an organization and how do you build scalability of sales enablement, I would say it is really to look at how do you weave in the sales enablement KPI for all the leadership in the organization. And that is the most sustainable way to build sales enablement in your organization. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope I was able to bring some points that would be of relevance to you. Um, Jill said sales is an outcome, not a goal, and I absolutely agree. It's a function of doing numerous things right, starting from the moment you target a potential prospect until you finalize the deal. And sales enablement is really what's going to ensure that you're able to do this effectively, right? And to me, that's what sales enablement is. And I know we are in tough times, unprecedented times, as everybody calls them, and we are all waiting to get into the new norm. But I think one thing that's going to be a kind of differentiating factor for each one of us is that we stay at it persistently and consistently with that same energy and passion to deliver. So keep doing it. Don't quit, because that's what sales is about. Working with our clients to ensure that we are able to deliver value for them consistently and persistently. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Think the first question that I can see there is from Andy, talking about how can we improve on the 36% stat. That stat always gets attention, because the fact that it is so low and we all want it to be better than that. I think in my experience, what I've seen is that why why do we have so many other elements around reporting in sales, um, while we could be using just one or two technology platforms to do that. And I think that's also what you're talking about here, Andy, that there's a lot of admin work that the sales leaders want their sellers to do, which is to say, I need this report right now. Why don't you work on this presentation right now? And these are places where the CRM tools can be of much value. Sadly, everybody thinks about the most perfect solution to buy when they're thinking about CRM. I would say a better thing is to look at the most integrated solution in your organization. So whatever works in your ecosystem, and to have it integrated so that it talks to finance, it talks to supply chain, it talks to all the other elements, so that you can be more effective. That's one piece for sure that I would say is important. I can see not a question, but a comment from Subramanian saying, why are nuts and bolts important only in uncertain times? Absolutely, they are as valuable in the non uncertain times as well. It's just that we are having this conversation in this time, and that's why that was the title of the slide. But I think nuts and bolts are always going to be important, and those are really best practices that we should be following. Um, okay, there is another question from Lyron, which says, sales enablement is often the connector between marketing, sales, and product. Should sales enablement advise sales and product strategy, or is that out of scope? Um, Certainly, they should be having a part to play in the strategy. I don't know if they can advise on strategy, because it really depends on how the function is set up. But certainly, they are an equal contributor to those conversations of strategy, because it's important to understand where we are in our enablement maturity as we start thinking through strategy. if we still are learning how to walk, and we are talking about sprinting into the next year, it is a stretch. I'm not saying it can't be done, but enablement needs to be able to bring that value then on the table. Um, how does sales enablement get a seat at the C-suite table? Well, if you heard the last part of my presentation, to me, sales enablement is not a function, but it is a KPI that is held by all the leaders in an organization, because two people or four people in an organization can't do sales enablement. It's much more and beyond the capability of a handful of people. So I think the best way to get a seat on the table is to have a KPI for all your C-suite, for sales enablement, and that's the easiest way to do that. Um, okay, those were some of the questions that I've been able to pick up. Okay, there's another one from Tom, which says, "What's the first step organizations can take for sales and marketing to become aligned?" Ooh, this is $1 million question. Um, I think lots of people have tried lots of things. The one that I have seen that has worked for some organizations is to get sales and marketing to align at the top, get them reporting to the same leadership at the C level. That ensures that they will have common objectives and they are like joined at the hip. If you keep them siloed, there will always be a struggle and there will always be a blame game and there will always be friction. So the best way to do that is tie them at the hip, get the same leader getting reporting from both, and that should change the way they look at alignment. Um, there's another question coming up. I'm curious, what do you think will be the main change to sales management practices in the future? Um, I think sales management is going to become more real time. The advantage that we have today is we have real time data available thanks to technology. So, earlier we used to do weekly, bi weekly, monthly reviews. I think that's already becoming a thing of the past, and for sure is going to be a thing of the past soon enough, because today actually you can track your sales in real time if you're a product company, even more so than if you're a services company. So sales management needs to change, and I think we are fairly slow on that if you ask me today. But certainly it needs to be more real time, it needs to be more data driven, it needs to get more objective. I'm not saying arm around the shoulder sales management conversations are going away, but I am saying that data will have a larger role to play in terms of determining where do you put the arm around the shoulder and where do you need to kick some whatever. So I think that's going to change. Um, what would be your preferred resource for gaining insight to the industry? Um, I'm not sure if I have a preferred resource, because today insight is available and a plethora of platforms are available for insight. I think the most important thing is to identify what is it that you're looking for. Otherwise, it becomes like looking for a needle in a haystack. So I think the important thing for me is to determine with laser sharp focus, as I said earlier, who are you going after? What is it that's important for them? And then looking at where can you find that information. So you may need to look across industry platforms to be able to find the right insights that you can then utilize in your sales conversations. Um, David says, what do you think is the most powerful trend today talking about enablement? Just the fact that we are talking about enablement is a powerful trend, I believe. The reason I say that is that in the past, there were salespeople and there were sales managers screaming, shouting, cursing in sales reviews, and that was supposed to be sales enablement. So the fact that today we have sales enablement as a function or a couple of resources, or the fact that we are having this conversation in a platform that Sales Collective has provided to us, I think that's a trend that we should all be very happy with right now. What is the first thing you suggest a company to do when starting to consider sales enablement function? That's a tough one. What's the first thing one would do? Would be to certainly identify the KPI of sales enablement and put it on the C-suite leadership KPIs. Before you hire resources, before you get technology, before you do anything about sales enablement, if sales enablement is not a KPI of the senior leadership of an organization, that's not going to work. So to me, that's the first one. When people start to recognize and the leadership takes that as a KPI, everything else will then follow. Okay, question from Vaibhav. Are there any special changes in approach post-COVID situation? Um, Absolutely. I think we need to be more nimble. We need to be more agile. Fail fast is my mantra nowadays, because the fact is, none of us have lived in this situation ever before. So if anybody is coming to you and saying, hey, you got a problem, I will tell you how to solve it, they gotta be kidding you. We are all in this together. We are all learning, and let's keep experimenting and trying things till something works. Um, it might be that salespeople lack the training they need to be time efficient. Yeah, could be. But if you heard me talk in the presentation, I believe you can't manage time. You just have to manage yourself within the time, because time is a fixed resource. And that's why I am a fan of processes. Establish some good processes, get people to start following the processes. Certainly, time efficiencies, resource efficiencies will come in, not just time efficiencies. Um, that's really my take on that. 36% could be better if salespeople were trained to the level they can optimize the tools available. Oh, well, we can have another 30-minute session on that point for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. Enabling people to use the tools effectively certainly will make them more effective. A fool with the tool is still a fool, they say. So yeah, that would be true. But there are other factors to it as well, like how do you incentivize those behaviors? Because training can take you just that far. Adoption of the behavior that people have been trained on needs to happen after the training. And I think that is where setting KPIs, creating rewards and recognitions would help. So those would be just few pointers that I can give on that. All right, I think I've answered almost all the questions there, except, okay, there's another one. Is it same for a CTO versus a CPO versus a CMO? Um, Maybe the KPI has a different dimension for the various leaders, but sales enablement needs to be a KPI. So the fact that if we are looking at aggressive revenue targets for next year, um, how are we going to enable it? There has to be a KPI tied to that in the C-suite. Certainly, there may be a dimension that the CTO will impact more than a CMO will impact, and those variances will come in. So that's fair, but the KPI surely needs to be there. Oh, one more question. Are you seeing any big spike in digital transformation journey? Absolutely. Today, everything is digital. We can't meet our clients can't meet us. So certainly there is a spike in digital. All the tech companies are laughing their way to the banks right now. So that surely tells us that's happening. Um, but I think this was in any case meant to happen. I I just think that we fast tracked the pace at which digital transformation was to happen. We were already on that journey. It's just that now you don't have a choice. So if you hadn't started the journey, you were already a laggard, and now you're going to struggle. So that's just my personal view. Um, are you giving training to your sales team to attack digital transformation prospects? Um, yeah, well, I think people who are in that space certainly are looking at those prospects today for their sales teams. But everything we do, it's not just about what your sales team does, but every dimension of business needs to go digital today. So your supply chain needs to go digital, your inventory management needs to go digital, your production needs to go digital. So I think digital transformation is not just in customer interface, but it's something that we need to look at it more holistically across the organizations. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions we have there. Thank you so much for the great engagement and the insightful questions. You made me think about those as well, and I'm certainly taking back some points from here. Um, Thank you, everybody, and thank you, SEC, for this opportunity.